I used to do part-time work for my dad at a cemetery about 15 years ago. He helped maintain the grounds by keeping the lawn mowed, flowers watered, and picked up left behind trash. After they had a service or around major holidays, he asked me to help out as more people meant more trash and things to pick up. Now, not to be disrespectful, but some of the stuff people left behind couldn't stay, like open food and drinks, or just their trash, tissues, wrappers, things like that. And those people prefer coming back to see that their loved one's resting place is being respected, so that's where we come in. It's typically the same thing each time. I'd walk around, pick up, adjust, look at the headstones occasionally, explain to someone where or how to find specific plots. I also typically worked during the day, so I didn't run into any creepy or paranormal experiences, which did make the job even easier. Now, this one time, I had to help my dad zone an area out for a family of 3, a husband and wife and their child that were going to be buried. We had the area all ready, but it was further in the back, which was usually used by people of higher class, local celebrities, I suppose, things like that, so that the families can have more privacy. At the time, I didn't pay too much attention to the news, but I did remember hearing how a family had been killed in their home in an apparent robbery. From the small things that I could pick up from my dad, this was the same family. So we had to get all plotted out, make sure the trees were trimmed, the surrounding area cleared for the services, etc. It was an all-day thing. Now, on the days of the service, there's no work being done on the grounds. My dad was usually in the back fixing things inside, doing paperwork, making calls, things like that. I ended up going up there to get my check and to just talk with my dad, but I didn't realize the services were that day until I saw a full lot of vehicles. So I entered in the back to not interrupt anything. I talked with my dad for a while, but he just seemed like his mind was elsewhere, like he seemed distracted. So I asked him about it. He said the funeral almost seemed like something out of a movie because they had a few cars that were far behind the rest of the group, and one man that got out of the vehicle had several other men surrounding him, like bodyguards. I didn't quite understand the concern over it and just tried to reason with him that they were probably important people, and if it's true what happened to the family, maybe it was a police protection for the rest of them. He still seemed to be keeping an eye on them, but loosened up a bit. I ended up leaving a bit after to enjoy having the weekend off and a fresh paycheck. Now, around this time, my mother had recently had surgery on her knee, so she needed a lot of help getting around. My sister worked overnights and was still living at home at the time, so she helped my mom while my dad was at work. Then he took care of her in the evenings. The day after the service, I was at my parents' for dinner, and while we were all settling down after dinner, my dad was telling me how he had this weird feeling that something wasn't right. He said he couldn't explain it, but it just felt like something was wrong. We tried to go through the normal things, make sure the stove was off, dog was inside, nothing missing. We even called my sister to make sure she was okay, which she was. Then my dad mentioned the cemetery, worried that he may have forgotten something there, like to close or lock the gates, the door to the crematorium, or something like that. Since he wasn't the owner, I could at least understand the concern, because he would be responsible if anything happened. I offered to go check it out to make him feel better. They were both hesitant at first, but I finally convinced them that I would be fine. I didn't believe in any superstitions, and if all I had to do was check some doors, then I would be fine. So I left with a promise to call them when I got there. I pulled up to the front and noticed an old beat-up car in the parking lot. The lot was usually empty, but We might occasionally get people parked there to sleep or just talking in their car or something. I got out and walked around the car, but as expected, there was no one in there and no one around. I figured the car just broke down as it looked like it hadn't moved in months as is. So I walked up to the building, checked the door, which had been locked, then went inside. I called my dad from the phone in the funeral home and walked around to make sure everything was turned off and locked. I seemed to have calmed his nerves some, so after I hung up, I locked the front entrance and started to head out. As I was walking back though, I noticed the gates to the grounds were partially open. There was usually this chain-like lock that went around it so no one could get in. It was just dangling from the fence, so my thought was my dad probably just forgot to lock it up, and that was probably the issue he was having. I went to secure it when I looked up into the fields with a weird feeling. Something was telling me to go check in there. I got annoyed with myself after convincing my dad nothing was wrong, but something was really bugging me to check it out. So I skipped grabbing the golf cart and thought I would do a quick walk through the grounds. Everything was looking fine until I kept walking towards the back. When I got there, there were 2 shovels sitting next to that family that was just buried, and even worse, they had been messed with. There was a pile of dirt on the side, and they had knocked over one of the headstones. As I went to turn around to go call someone, I was then knocked out cold. When I finally came back, I noticed it was still dark, and I was lying in the grass with my head pounding. That's when I started hearing the familiar sounds of dirt being shoveled. I tried to turn around to check the sound when I felt something cold to the back of my head. I will never forget that sound. I just threw my hands up and stopped moving otherwise. I don't remember what I said to them, but it was probably something pathetic and pleading. It felt like I was like this for hours, though. I just remember there were at least 3 people, and they weren't speaking English, but I have no idea what language it was. After a while, I was told to lie face down and count to 100. I know I didn't get far when I was knocked out again. This time when I woke up though, it was day, and I was not in the graveyard, but in a hospital bed. Of course, my parents were there, and they were freaking out, trying to explain what happened. When I wasn't back at their place after 20 minutes or so, my dad started to get worried. He went out himself to check, but also called the cops to meet him there. When they arrived, they saw my car in the lot, me not in it, and one of the tires slashed. Then they found me. Those people had completely dug up the husband's grave and destroyed the coffin to obviously get something he was buried with. But what? What could be so important you have to dig up a grave for it? I know they never caught anyone because I had to make a statement. They kept me informed, and as far as I know, no one in the family knows who could have done it either, or at least they aren't talking. They did push my dad to convince the owner to get security cameras, and since then, the worst they get is a raccoon or a person sleeping in the parking lot again. But I also won't go there alone at night anymore. This was something that recently came back into my mind that happened back in the 2000s, I believe. There was one place me and my siblings loved to go to as a kid. The place where your parents wouldn't tell you until you got there so you didn't pass out in the car from excitement. Oh, the joys of going to Chuck E. Cheese. I shudder at the thought of going there now, or taking my own kid there, but it was a blast as a child. For those that don't know what this is, it's like a child's arcade place. Tons of small arcade games that you win tickets from for prizes, cheap pizza, and if you're lucky, you could see the animatronic show of the band on the stage, or Chuck, the mouse himself, walking around the crowd. Now, there was also an occasional clown that would be there, walking around making balloon animals for kids. It appeared like they may have been hired for parties, and other times they were just there for exposure. Some of them just had a goofy vest on with a wig and a nose. Some of them went full out with the suit, the shoes, and the makeup too. I was just happy to get the balloon animals. There was one clown though that I didn't care for. I think he called himself Patches. He always came in and immediately let his presence be known by playing a kazoo. Some kids loved it, but the parents not so much. He'd always walk around to the kids playing the games and asking normal questions like, "What's your name? How old are you? What's your favorite animal? Favorite color?" etc. Then he would make the balloon animals for us. All seemed normal, but he would also be very hands-on. He would high-five us, hug us when the band was playing. He'd hold our hands and dance in a circle to it. It didn't take long for me, though, to become uncomfortable with him. Something about him was just very off. We learned about safety and things like that in school, and at least in my kid mind, I felt like I was smart enough to know better, or to know when something was wrong. I was the oldest of 4 kids, so I felt I had to protect my little sisters and brother. When he would show up, I'd go play a game nearby so I was close to them and just watched. He would talk to all the other kids, make them balloons, and I noticed that he would hug the girls and give the boys high fives, unless they tried to hug him. But it wasn't the same as when he hugged the girls. It was a quick one-hand pat on the back, but the girls, it was always both arms wrapped around them for several uncomfortable seconds. That was one of the reasons I didn't like him. He did that to me, and his hand sat on my lower back, way too low than where a strange clown should have them. There were times where it got really uncomfortable, and unfortunately, it got to my little sister as well. It was a Saturday night, and since we were going to be going back to school in about a week, our parents took us there. Unfortunately, Patches was already there when we arrived. I asked if we could sit in the booth closest to the play area, so that way our parents could see us too. Thankfully, they agreed. We ordered our pizza, and then we got to go play while we waited. For a while, he kept his distance, but just kept looking over at us and waving. His grin was just creepy. It almost made me want to cry. My youngest brother and sister loved him, and my other sister seemed to be a bit standoffish about him, so at least I knew she wouldn't proactively approach him. He did eventually make his way over towards us as my sister yelled for him, wanting a balloon. So he did this little dance over to us and started making her one. While doing so, he looked over at me and asked what I wanted and called me a princess. Gross. I said I didn't want one, and he made a quick pouty face and continued talking to my sister. When he finished, he then leaned down to her and said, "For you, my princess." She grabbed it from him, said thank you, and then he held out his arms for a hug. At this point, my brother had come up to me asking for more tokens, so I was distracted. After I handed him some, I looked back over to see this damn clown patting my sister on her butt. A 6-year-old. I saw my sister start to pull back, and she looked like she was about to cry. I know I was just a kid myself, but I tried pushing him back and grabbed my sister real quick and walked off. Patches didn't make any attempt to apologize or explain himself, and just waved at us and smiled. I noticed my brother playing a game, so I immediately grabbed him and walked back to our booth where our parents were and my other sister. My mom immediately noticed something was wrong and started asking us what had happened. I didn't want to upset my sister more, so I remember whispering to my mom what I had just seen, and her expression quickly changed. She made us sit in the booth, grabbed my dad, and whispered something to him, to which he immediately started looking around. I had never been afraid of my father, but the look he had scared me. He started walking towards the games when my mom hollered for him to get an employee instead. At this point, my sister started crying and I was trying to calm her down when our pizza got called. My mom shouted for the employee that was at the prize counter nearby, and she immediately started telling her what had happened. My dad, however, was already raising his voice at this clown as he gathered his stuff calmly like nothing ever happened. It was a mess after that. A manager came out and was trying to get the clown to leave, all while still trying to act like everything was fine. I remember my dad grabbing this guy and nearly throwing him out of the place. The employees did call the police and we filed a report, but Patches apparently left before they got there. I had no idea what happened at that point on, or if they ever caught him though. I learned later on that he had whispered in my sister's ear something about taking her home with him. In between that and groping her, she started getting scared. However, many years later, when we were over at my parents' for some kind of get-together, we started talking about weird and creepy things that happened to us, or things we thought were creepy as kids, and this was brought up. My mom looked uncomfortable at first, but my sister told my mom that she was okay. She was past it and it didn't bother her anymore. My dad said that the reason my mom seemed upset was because of the aftermath. Turns out, Patches came up in the news at some point while we were still kids. He was caught doing something similar to another girl, but was actually arrested for it. He ended up taking his own life while in custody, and when they searched his home, they found even worse evidence. This guy was definitely a predator, and it really bothered my parents for a long time that we had been around him. None of us blame our parents, though. It wasn't their fault, and of course, he tried avoiding the parents, too. I wish I would have spoken up sooner, though. Who knows what that could have done. The kicker to all of this was when I learned Gacy went by Patches the Clown, too. Of all names to choose from, that's what that sick bastard went with. Safe to say my family is anti-clowns. This happened back when I was single, obviously, and working a night shift at a certain large chain restaurant that we're going to go ahead and call the Ringing Burrito. Anyways, the night that this all started was incredibly slow. I had done all the closing tasks and we were pretty much just sitting around and waiting for someone to come in. I was standing in the register area for the drive-thru and swiping through Tinder when I came across a profile of a girl that I actually thought was pretty cute. I was looking over her bio and reading about her. She was a year older than me, started her bio with a stupid joke, and said that her favorite animal was koala bears. I remember thinking that was kind of strange, so when we matched and started talking, I literally started off with, "Why koalas?" She responded with a laughing emoji and said that they were cute and also kind of dumb, like her. The fact that she jumped in with self-deprecating humor was perfect for me, and I thought it was hilarious. We chatted for a while on the app and just kind of made small talk. She asked what I did for a living, and I told her that I was attending classes during the day and working at the Ringing Burrito during the evenings. Honestly, there were so many around the town that I wasn't overly concerned with just saying that as a general place. After a while, she said that she needed to do some stuff, but asked if we could get together after my shift. I was pretty excited at first, but then realized that I'd been working in the back of a Ringing Burrito for the last few hours, and I had classes in the morning. I told her that we could meet up on Friday night if she was available, as I actually had it off, and she seemed to agree, which was great. A couple hours later, near the end of my shift, we get a car in the drive-thru and I do my normal line, "Welcome to Ringing Burrito, how may I help you?" "Hi, I'm looking for a Michael," my name. I was incredibly confused. I had no idea why someone would be coming through the drive-thru and looking for me. I just said, okay, I'm actually Michael. Can I help you?" I hear the person on the other end say something like, "Finally," and then saw the car pull up. To my surprise, the woman in the car was the girl that I had matched with a couple hours prior. I just kind of smiled at her, incredibly confused and unsure how to handle the situation. "Oh, hi. How are you?" was all I was able to muster as I stared at her with an awkward smile. "I'm good now. This is the 5th Ringing Burrito I've been to looking for you." She stared at me when she said this with what I can only say was the most terrifying smile I had ever seen. It was legitimately the smile of a crazy person that had just found exactly what they were looking for. "So, do you want to go get drinks now?" I was beyond confused. I was still at work. I was still working, and obviously so. This woman had been hunting different ringing burritos, looking for me. I just kind of stared at her, then stared down at my uniform, just kind of saying, "You do see where I am and how the situation looks," with my eyes. She just kept her terrifying stare and smile pointed at me. After a few moments of this horrifying awkwardness, my manager tapped me on the shoulder and basically motioned for me to move, so I did. He stepped forward and asked how he could help her. She said that she was looking for me and all that she had been through to find me that evening. He basically told her to leave, and after a few moments of her screaming at him, she left. After that had happened, he told me that he saw how scared I looked from across the restaurant and felt like he needed to step in. I thanked him and told him that she was crazy. He agreed. After work, I checked Tinder to see if she had messaged me at all, and nope, she had blocked me though, so I guess she got the hint. This is probably the only really weird thing that I ever got out of Tinder, thankfully, and after this night, I never heard from her again. Back while I was in college, I always tried to find odd-end jobs to make some extra money to spend. My parents paid for my dorm and basically gave me a small allowance for food and supplies that I needed, but anything extra that I wanted or needed, I had to work for it myself. The college was my parents' choice anyways, so I guess I was lucky to not have to worry about it, but it still wouldn't have been my first choice. Anyways, I would browse Craigslist for jobs like cleaning, baby, pet, or house sitting, running errands, things like that. I tended to be successful with my inquiries as well. As wrong as it may sound, I was a younger female in a local college just trying to earn some extra money, so they tended to trust me quicker than other applicants, I suppose. So I found one listed on housekeeping basically. The description said they just needed someone to come and tidy up, wipe down cabinets, tables, drawers, dust, mop, and vacuum, things like that. Usually the homes I did this at, the people either left when I was there, were in a separate room like an office, or I've had elderly people who couldn't get around and do those types of things anymore. The description also said the person responding had to be a female in a certain age range, which was in my age range, like college student ages. I know it may sound stupid now, but like I said, I saw that and again thought they just wanted someone local that was possibly in school, something like that. Nothing creepy about it. So I responded to it. I got a response pretty quickly asking when I could start, and I suggested over the weekend since I was in school. They agreed and actually said if they liked my work, They wanted to talk about a recurring job with them once or twice a week. Again, I thought this was going to be great, as it was going to be a steady income. They were going to pay me about $200 for 4 hours that Saturday, and then we're talking about a weekly gig around the same amount for 4 to 8 hours. So, again, I was excited and ready to make some easy money. I was not thinking of any negative consequences other than maybe the house was really messy, but that's what I'm getting myself into, otherwise I wouldn't have applied. So Saturday came, I got the address and headed out to the location. It was a tiny house, like 1 story, maybe a basement, but there couldn't be more than 2 rooms and a bathroom. So even if it was a wreck, at least there shouldn't be too much to do. From the outside though, the house looked pristine. It had a really pretty foggy glass on the door with teal curtains in the window. But when he answered the door, the first thing I noticed was the smell. It was awful. It smelled like a bunch of spoiled food was just thrown at me. I knew I had to have made a face when he answered, but it was hard enough choking back the gag. The man, on the other hand, looked completely different. His hair looked clean and greased back. He had on slacks and a wrinkled button-up shirt on, but it was open and he didn't have anything under it. But he just stared at me until I greeted him and told him why I was there, to which, after looking me up and down a few times, he smiled and welcomed me in. Holy hell, that place looked awful. If you've seen hoarders, that's pretty much what I stepped into. There were trash bags everywhere with God knows what in them. To-go food containers strewn across the floor, the couch, the bookshelf, some with food still in them, some empty. I'm sure that's partially what I smelled too. You could see the roaches immediately scatter when you moved anything. I'm taking all this in, and he just looks absolutely fine with this situation, like it's a normal cleaning job. Then, as he continues to talk about what he expects out of me, he does not take his eyes off of me. And I'm not talking eye contact. He said he wanted to start by taking out some unwanted things and then reorganizing. To me, it all looked like garbage. I could barely make out a couch. All this, and every time he would address me, it would be baby. Does that make sense, baby? Can you handle that, baby? Again, I just smiled and nodded. Now, to add to the unsettling house and the creepy vibes I'm now getting from this guy, he then said, I'm sure after all this work, you'll probably be tired and sweaty, so you're free to use my bathroom and anything in it, baby. I won't bother you while you're in there. It's the least I can do. Yeah, no. I told him thank you, and being a little weirded out, I asked if I could go ahead and get started, to which he handed me a box of trash bags and said go for it. I tried to just press on for the time being, thinking I'm not going to be able to do this on my own in one day, so I'll fill a few trash bags, get my money, and never return. However, instead of ignoring me or leaving the room or anything other people would have done, he sat on the couch, facing me, watching me every time I bent over to pick something up. Now, knowing that I'm bound to get dirty at these, I had worn some old leggings and a loose t-shirt. Nothing exactly flattering, but I guess he liked something. I, on the other hand, was not comfortable with the looks that I was getting and really started to feel uncomfortable. I asked if I could use the restroom before I went further, and he seemed happy to show me to the bathroom. I walked in, closing the door behind me, and just stood there for a second, trying to think of a reason to just leave without possibly upsetting him, not knowing what he could possibly try to do. That's when I noticed how different the bathroom was compared to the rest of the house. It was damn near spotless. The shower seemed to have rust stains in it, but the tub was white and clean. The counter and floor was completely clean, and even the toilet was clean. Why was the bathroom kept up with? Then I saw the small plastic 3-drawer container sitting next to the sink. I noticed it because of the small piece of cardboard laying on top of it that said free to use. Like these were free toiletries, I guess. Curious, since the rest of the house was a disaster, I wanted to see what he kept in there. The first drawer had random soaps in it, and when I say random, I mean it. There was a half-used Dove bar, a small travel-sized bottle of shampoo, half empty, and even sanitizer, I think. The next drawer had random cloth in it. I think they were supposed to be hand towels, maybe, but I didn't even want to touch them. Then there was the bottom drawer. No toiletries, towels, or anything useful for a shower. They were just adult toys. And that's when my uncomfortable level peaked, and I was ready to bounce. So I slowly closed the last drawer, flushed the toilet, and walked out, ready to say I had to leave, when I saw him immediately standing at the door, waiting for me to open it. That's when he holds up a maid dress and says, "Oh, this is for you, so you can be more comfortable cleaning, baby," and winks at me. I first told him that I was okay with what I had on, and he became slightly agitated, saying he insisted that it was part of the job requirement. So, thinking fast, I looked at it, told him it was too small and it wouldn't fit me, and before I could say anything else, he started walking off yelling he has other sizes and will get the right one. As he started rambling on about where he got them and asking for my size, I gave him one that doesn't really exist in women's clothing. I said like 34 large, I think, and he said to give him a moment. When I noticed he was now in the back room, out of sight, I darted for the door, noticing he had locked it behind me, and quickly left. I got in my car, locked all my doors, and sat there for a second, gathering my thoughts, when I noticed he was staring at me confused in the window, so I left. He tried messaging me about it, asking why I left, and that I wasn't going to get paid for the work I did if I didn't come back, to which I told him that, due to the amount of work that I would have to do, the pay would be tripled. I knew there was no way he would agree to it, so that's why I went with that. To which, as expected, he replied by saying that was an outrage. I charged too much, and I wasn't even attractive. Too bad for me, I guess. I don't take jobs from Craigslist now, as I have an actual job, but I did scream them better after that one. And that was another collection of our true scary stories. Some of these were pretty creepy, especially the Chuck E. Cheese one for me, because as a kid, used to love it there. You could go and have tons of pizza and not care about the quality of the pizza. You could play tons of games. And now some of the things I see about them and the things that they do is weird to me as an adult, but not like hide your kids or don't take them, but more of like a abandoned mall creepy. That makes sense. I don't know. I'm just glad I never ran into creepy clowns there. Just got some cool balloon animals. Anyways, if you did enjoy this video, please do give it a like below. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And lastly, don't forget to leave a comment. Let me know what story was your favorite, or have you ever come across any weird postings on Craigslist? That's a bit of a throwback for me too. I just avoid them. Anyways, with that being said, my friends, I hope you have a fantastic week, and until next time, take care.